Welcome back to part 2 of the video 10 things from the light novel that the anime missed for Ascendance of a Bookworm part 1 volume 3. In the previous video, we talked about what happened after mine collapsed, many details about Lutz and mine's winter activities, how much money these two kiddos made throughout the spring, apprenticeship preparations, and the vested interest troubles involving the Parchment Guild. This volume and this video finishes part 1 of the story, with mine's baptism, her meeting Ferdinand for the first time, which is definitely a high point in anybody's story, and the confrontation at the temple. So let's continue. Let's do some world building stuff. In this volume, we learn about Tato Fruits for the first time. You see, whenever Mine and Lutz make paper in the forest, they usually spend some part of the day gathering wood, fruit, herbs, and other stuff from the forest. After all this time, Mine has gotten quite good at not picking as many poisonous plants, but she still relies on Lutz to make sure she doesn't take home any poisonous or harmful stuff. So she notices that Lutz avoids some red, thumb-sized fruit and asks if it is poisonous. He tells her that they're just Tato fruit, and they only have water inside and have no nutritional value at all. He tells her that Taos get larger by the time summer comes around, and that is when they are used as nature's water balloons during the Star Festival. Mine learns that she missed last year's Star Festival. This was, by the way, when she was about to die but only came back to her senses when she remembered the promise that she had made to Lutz. Because she missed it last year, she promises that this year they will enjoy the Star Festival together. It's funny because the topic of Tato fruit comes up almost immediately after Lutz remarks on how the bark of the trombe is much different from the regular wood, and Mine replies saying, "Trombes sure are dangerous plants, aren't they?" It would have been interesting to see what would have happened if she had touched a Tato fruit at this point. But as she avoids touching it, the connection between mana, trombes, and Tato fruit is not revealed until later. But it does make you think. If she had touched the Tato fruit and seen how it drained her mana, either here or at the previous Star Festival, how do you think this would have impacted the story? Would she have made the connection between the devouring heat and mana right there and then? Would it have altered the story at all? Or maybe nothing would have happened as the little fruit was still small. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious. At last, with the arrival of summer, is Lutz and Mine's baptism. Mine has grown since the winter so that her sash is too short to double loop. So she teaches Thule how to make a double bow knot, amazing her sister once again. Thule, wanting to return the favor for Mine making her hair look pretty on her own baptism, brushes her hair. Though Mine has grown up a little since the winter, she's still too tiny. But at least she's really cute, and her dress and pin make her look like a rich girl. All the neighborhood women and the girls crowd around Mine, admiring her dress, tugging at her hairpin, messing up her hair, overwhelming her. Mine finds it too scary and makes several escape attempts as she looks for Lutz, only to be hoisted up in the air and tossed around by Lutz's older brothers, until she's finally rescued and the signal to depart for the temple rings. Mine and Lutz, living at the far south end of the city, have to walk much more than the richer kids who live in the northern part of town to get to the temple. So Gunther carries Mine all the way to the temple plaza. On the way to the temple, she spots Benno, Karina, and Otto, Mark, and all the Gilberta Company employees and apprentices cheering for them. Mine waves enthusiastically as she passes by, dropping the elegant Japanese emperor-like hand wave she'd been using all that time. She also sees Frida and all of Frida's family, Frida's cook, and even Frida's lady's maid cheering for her. In the light novel, Gunther sets Mine down before they actually climb the stairs up to the temple. So because Mine is so slow and because Lutz is patiently going along at her pace, they end up being the very last ones in the procession, and everyone in the plaza remarks as they go into the temple holding hands that they looked like they were going to get married, much to Gunther's despair. Once they were in the temple, the doors closed and a magical tool that dampens sound was activated, so that no matter how loudly the children talked, their voices came out no louder than the sound of a whisper. Time to get their citizenship. As the anime shows, it involves getting a drop of their blood into a medallion. Mai notices how a priest is really rough with a child, making the kid scream when he pokes his finger with a needle. But the scream is muted because of the magic tool. Luckily for Mai, the priest that conducts her ceremony is much more gentle, not aggressive like the other, and her finger doesn't hurt as much. Now, the light novel doesn't say that her priest was also tall, statuesque, blue-haired, golden-eyed, and perfect in every way, but yes, the priest that conducted her citizenship ceremony was none other than Ferdinand. And please don't ask why Ferdinand gave her this look in the anime. As far as I know, there really wasn't anything special about her medallion glowing after she put her blood into it. And in the manga, he actually just looks kind of nice and smiley as he's ever going to look. While we're on the subject of Ferdinand, let's just note that for all that later on in the series, others describe him as being heartless and cold, Ferdinand is not that at all. Rather than doing things quickly for efficiency's sake, he's gentle to avoid causing pain here. And that's really sweet. Like in the anime, the High Bishop teaches them how to pray. Mai collapses from holding in her laughter and is carried off to a fancy room to rest because she looks like a rich girl. But the reason she gets out of bed is because she needs to use the bathroom, but doesn't want to use a chamber pot nearby because there was no water for her to clean up with afterwards. She leaves the room in search for water and gets lost. A grey-robed attendant finds her. Mai tells us in the light novel that this attendant lady had a competent/sexy air about her, kind of like a sexy secretary. The grey-robed attendant's name is Jenny, by the way. We learn her name a little later in the light novels, but I'd rather just use Jenny from now on. Now, Jenny takes her to the High Bishop when Mai begs to become one of the Temple Shrine Maidens. And Mai treats the whole thing as a job interview. She lets it slip that she's registered with the Merchants Guild, that she has money saved, and that she's made various profitable products. When the High Bishop prods further, she summarizes everything she had done until then, and what she had earned from her products. We who know the true nature of the bishop are going like, "No, you idiot! Shut up!" But that is mine for you, and if she's going to be in character, she's going to do it all the way. After he agrees to take her in, Mai does the praying pose, collapses again, and once more she's carried off to rest, but this time Jenny stays behind so Mai is not left unsupervised. And Mai really has to use the bathroom, so she ends up using the chamber pot with Jenny watching and then cleaning up after her, much to Mai's dismay. Mai was really at the point of tears from the embarrassment. The rest of the book proceeds pretty much as in the anime, with Mai meeting Ferdinand at the temple and him reading to her, Benno giving her advice about negotiating for better treatment, and a confrontation between the bishop and Mai's family, which I think the anime did so well, maybe even better than the light novel, courtesy of Violin Chen providing the soundtrack. What the anime missed, however, are the incredibly informative extra stories which give a much-needed extra perspective on the events that took place in this volume. They also give further insight into the lives, stories, and motivations of various other characters. First, we have Mark's point of view story called The Master and I. This story explains some more of the city's merchant, culture, terminology, and practices, explaining the different kinds of workers that exist, from apprentices called lehangis, who are workers in training and the lowest in the workshop hierarchy, to le'earls, employees with higher status, long-term job security in the workshop, and higher pay. He also tells us how merchant kids do something similar to a student exchange program with other stores as part of their training. Mark was one such kid, apprenticing at the Gilberta Company. Mark has known Benno since he was a baby, being a mere apprentice at the Gilberta Company around the time of Benno's birth. Due to some life circumstances, Mark ended up trailing behind his peers career-wise. But Benno's father was good to him and treated him not as a standard apprentice, but as a full-time worker, and paid him as such, earning Mark's loyalty. When Benno's father died, the company's position became very precarious, so Mark asked his brother, who managed Mark's family store, to give the Gilberta Company his support. Instead, his brother mocked the Gilberta Company's misfortune and refused to lend his aid. This made Mark so angry that he swore to protect the Gilberta Company and his young master Benno just to spite his family, and proceeded to cut his family off, deciding to stay with the Gilberta Company when his apprenticeship contract ended. He and Benno worked really hard to save the Gilberta Company, making it even grander than it had been before. He also stood by him through various personal tragedies, including the death of Liz, the woman that Benno loved. During this time, Mark also orchestrated the ruin of his family's store as vengeance and used it as a stepping stone for the Gilberta's company growth. And all I can say is that Mark is really savage. He looks really gentlemanly, but don't let appearances fool you. This guy, he can be pretty ruthless too. Mark witnesses the Benno Mine exchange as they argue about how they can compete with Frida's pound cake. Mine and Benno argued passionately, with Mine standing on her chair to be at eye level with Benno. And it reminded Mark how Benno used to argue with Liz, thinking that the more two people fight, the closer they are, and that maybe they had grown to trust each other. Mark notes that Benno looks the most alive when he is furiously arguing with Mine about business, and wonders if these arguments make Benno feel as good as arguing with Liz used to do. Mark asks Mine to think of a solution or compromise so they could forge ahead without running into problems with vested interests again. The solution that Mine came up with? The Italian restaurant. Benno could just open an eatery, avoid problems with the Bakers Guild, and sell food as well as sweets for a totally different clientele. Mark also sees that just as he is dragged around by Benno's enthusiasm for business, Lutz also suffers in the same way when it comes to Mine each time she gets carried away with new ideas. So he swears to himself that he will train and raise Lutz in such a way that he will survive no matter how hard Benno or Mine drag him around. It is during this chapter that Benno tells Mark some important things that he's been contemplating, including adopting Lutz so they don't lose their connection to Mine, and leaving the Gilberta Company to Otto and Karina to open his own store. Benno says that the kiddos had, as of late, reminded him of the dreams he'd once given up because of having to take care of Karina and the Gilberta Company. When Benno asks Mark what he wishes to do once Benno opens up his new company, Mark decides that he will stay by his side, just as he did in the past. There is another short story from Lutz's point of view. It's a day in the life of an apprentice merchant. We get to see the curious way he balances his family life in the lower city and his professional life as an apprentice for the Gilberta Company. It's fascinating how he has to bridge the two lives somehow, and the contrast between his life with his rowdy family and his life with the well-trained merchant apprentices and co-workers is almost painful. He is really working hard to catch up to the other apprentices who have been immersed in the merchant world from birth, slowly training himself out of common habits, like wiping his mouth on his sleeve, speaking in slang, and such. He is clean, makes a point of cleaning his teeth, washing his hair, as well as his clothes on break, and thank goodness he has that rented room upstairs. It's just a great little story that shows just how much Mine's influence has had on Lutz's life. Without her introduction and without her teaching and training for the apprenticeship, it would have been impossible for Lutz to even have made it so far. But Lutz's hard work has also paid dividends, and I can't help but cheer him on as he continues on bravely. One final short story worth mentioning is one titled The Roots of the Guildmaster's Worries, a short story that at first glance might seem like, who cares, but it's actually pretty important. The Guildmaster, whose name we learn is Gustav, is the closest that comes to being this story's villain, or antagonist. After all, he tried to trick Mine into signing up with his store when her life was at stake, dragged his feet when it came to establishing the Plant Paper Guild, and sided against Benno in the incident involving the vested interests. The more the Guildmaster antagonizes Benno, the more Benno is determined to go against him. For example, during the meeting with the vested interests, Benno went as far as to ask the guildmaster, if you're getting too old to read properly, maybe you should retire already. And hey, I'll do you a favor and take your place. In addition, Benno and the guildmaster have a bad personal history. Remember, the guildmaster proposed to Benno's widowed mother almost immediately after Benno's father died. It was because of the guildmaster's pressure that one of Benno's sisters had to leave the city, and Karina had no choice but to marry Otto, a humble traveling merchant, because the guildmaster wanted her to marry one of his sons and scared away all the other suitors. The guildmaster also offered Benno one of his daughters as a wife right after Benno's love of his life had died. Because of this, we are not kindly disposed to think of the guildmaster in anything but a negative way. But do take into account that this time we've been hearing about the guildmaster's motives through Benno's slightly biased perspective. Benno believes the man is out to ruin him on purpose and sees him as an enemy, when in reality the guildmaster's motives were not as nefarious as that. The guildmaster is just a stubborn old man with an EQ of -100. And okay, yes, he is also working on his own interests, but then so is Benno and all the other characters in this story. Through this short story, where the guildmaster is mostly just talking to his assistant, we learn that his main motive is to help bring profit to Ehrenfest's merchants equally. And he is worried that Benno monopolizing all of Mind's inventions for the sake of having more profit and prestige would bring about conflict and possibly chaos within the market. Maybe it would lead to a market collapse. And that is why he resisted Benno so much when it came to the Plant Paper Guild. As to the other stuff involving Benno's family and their shared personal history, well, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. When Benno's father died, the guildmaster knew that they would lose business, their noble clientele, as well as most of their apprentices. The Gilberta company was sure to collapse without a strong hand to guide them. Benno, after all, was just a young man who'd barely come of age and would hardly be up to the task, or so he believed. So because the guildmaster was not married at the time, he swooped in and proposed to Benno's mom, not once imagining how badly received such a proposal might come across. Every single time he tried to push for a marriage alliance between the families was for the sake of giving the Gilberta company extra support, thinking it would be a shame to see a sharp-minded young businessman being crushed before his prime, and basically underestimating Benno's will and abilities. While hearing his assistant talk about how Benno has warmed up a little after he sold Mine a magical item that helped extend her life, the guildmaster sees a magic tool in the shape of a white bird fly into the room, land on his desk, and turn into a letter. He immediately recognizes it as a high-priority message from a noble, and is surprised at receiving one such letter. It's very rare to get one. It's a message from the temple requesting all information pertaining to Mine and her workshop, her funds, and so on. And so he learns that she is to join the temple as a shrine maiden. This is worrisome. He knows that Mine's life depends on the magical tools she'll have access to at the temple, but knows that she is a commoner and could be treated with utter cruelty. She could be treated as a slave depending on what noble picks her up. Because Mine has stepped into a very dangerous world, he regretfully decides to minimize the contact between Mine and Frida until Mine's situation becomes clearer. Still, he writes his report to the temple in such a way that makes Mine appear as valuable as possible to help her secure the best treatment she can. Even as Frida storms his office complaining that Benno has just told her he plans on keeping all of Mine's recipes for himself, and makes the guildmaster go into a fury. Once more, we see Kazuki-sensei's wonderful writing at work. Every character she's introduced to us is a delight to read about, and the motivations behind their actions are clear and character-driven. If reading a proper translation that is beautifully illustrated is not enough reason to get the light novel, the short stories certainly are. I highly recommend you check them out if you have the chance. And so ends part 1 of Ascendance of a Bookworm, Daughter of a Soldier. The next book starts part 2 of this story. Mine steps into a totally new world full of its own rules, challenges, and pitfalls. It is a world where she'll encounter nobles and magic items and face all kinds of dangers too, as well as opportunities to grow. But we will delve headfirst into it in the next video. I hope you'll enjoy learning more about this light novel as much as I do, and I hope you found these light novel tidbits fun. If you haven't read the light novels, let me know what you found interesting to learn more about. Or, if you already read the light novels, let me know which are some of your favorite parts. Again, no spoilers in the comments beyond the anime. If you like this video, please be sure to share it, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you know when my next video premieres. They only take a single click, but these things really do help the channel grow and reach other Bookworm fans. And speaking of comments, I have enjoyed so much engaging with all of you through YouTube and off YouTube. I especially am thankful for those of you who have helped me to make the videos just a little better. So thank you so much. Until next time, bye bye.